welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us here today. My name is Cheryl Mack and I am head of community and comms here at Stone and Chalk. So the alumni series that we have today is basically an event series that follows up with our alumni since they commenced their time at Stone and Chalk and since they've left, such as Flair. And we basically follow up and see how they got to where they are today and hopefully get some cool stories along the way. So I'm very excited to be able to say that we have both the co-founders here today. So hopefully we'll get some insights and some inspiration. And so get comfortable. Virtual housekeeping. So we know it's really important for you to get your questions asked and answered. So please use the Q&A function. If you've been on Zoom before, I'm sure you know where the button is, but just pop your question in there and someone on the team is monitoring it and will pass it on to me. Unfortunately, we may not get to all of your questions, but I promise I will try to get to as many as possible. And if you have an absolute burning question that doesn't get answered, I'm sure we can reach out to the guys and see if they can follow up. We will also be sending you a short survey at the end, and we really appreciate it if you complete it. With all the events that are happening out there in the cyber world today, I think it's really important for us to make sure that we're putting on the right events, we're driving the right content for you. So for those of you who are here today, I know we've got about 150 that are registered, and I know you aren't all residents of Stone and Chalk, so welcome. We have people streaming in from all over Australia, but we also have people internationally from Vietnam, Auckland, and Singapore. So welcome to our international guests. It's fantastic to have you. And so a little bit about Stone and Chalk. So we were founded in fintech in 2015. But we have now gone to emerging tech. So we also focus on tech sectors, for example, in ag tech, med tech, health tech, and space tech. In particular, defense and space is in our Adelaide hub. We also have a hub in Melbourne as well. So we're a not-for-profit organization, and our mission is to nurture, connect, and propel those who are seeking to solve the world's most pressing business and social challenges. And in this sense, our founders, corporate partners, industry professionals, investors, and mentors, and of course, our alumni are shaping the future together. Today, we are going to be talking to Dan and James, the co-founders of Flair. I keep accidentally saying Flair HR, but Flair. Who have just recently secured $22 million in Series C funding, which is absolutely super exciting considering we're in the middle of a pandemic. So we're going to talk to them a bit about their firsthand account of their journey to this date, their successes and failures along the way, and using first principle thinking to drive their network growth. So I hope you're excited. Today we have Dan Cohen, who is the managing director and co-founder of Flair, and Daniel essentially founded Park Assist previously, raising $15 million in venture capital to build a global IoT business across 15 countries before exiting the TKH Group in 2013, which is fantastic. He was also an investment banker at Goldman Sachs, but we won't hold that against him. We also have James Wyndon here today with us. He's also managing director and co-founder at Flair. James is an Australian entrepreneur and investor with deep experience in consumer internet tech. And he was previously the co-founder of Brigade, which was a social network for voters whose mission is to build technologies that modernize democracy, which I think we need more of now more than ever. And prior to that, he was also the president of Facebook Causes, which was a super cool platform that was for activism and had over 200 million users. So that's enough talking for me. Let's start to hear from our guests today. Let's start with Dan. Can you tell us about Flair and where it all began?
Yeah, so look, Flair's a 4 to 5 year old journey now. It really came about then on the basis that we were looking at how financial services are engaged and distributed within this country, and I think kind of engagement was the big problem that we wanted to solve for in financial services, and the way they had traditionally been distributed was capturing largely uneducated, apathetic, or passive users at a very early age and maintaining them forever. And that strategy, which has worked very successfully from a financial perspective, doesn't necessarily represent what's in the best interests of people as they grow and change. And so Flair was the mechanism or the idea that could really go about changing the way people engage with financial services. So that's 5 years ago now. We've come a long way since then.
And we've got a note here around the 5 W's. Can you tell us what that is?
5 W's, what, when, why, who, I would suppose, with the 5 W's, kind of when we think about ideation and right into development of product market fit, we really go back to those 5 concepts of what, when, why, who. And so who is our target audience that we're going after? Why are we kind of building that product for that particular target market? In terms of when, timing. I mean, timing is just so important. A lot of it comes down to luck that you can't control, and you learn that the hard way as you build these things. But is the timing right associated with the product that you're building? And I think kind of really the who, when, why, what kind of argument really goes in and tests or creates a sense of discipline in the way that we find product market fit in what we build. And so it's something that we kind of impress right across our teams in kind of achieving that mission and vision of how do we change the way that Australians engage with financial services and transform it from a debt construct really to a savings kind of construct, which moves or shifts the value that we create from the bank or the institution right through to a customer-centric lens. How do we really change the lives of consumers, not how do we change the lives of product providers? I think that when, why, who, what kind of construct really does enforce that discipline in achieving our mission and vision.
That's fantastic. And I guess along that vein of achieving that mission and getting that vision, what's it like fundraising during a pandemic?
I mean, we spent a lot of time on me. I think James did the hard yards during the pandemic. I really sat back and watched him weave some magic. So I'd probably shift that question over to the guy on my right.
I'm still trying to work out what the 5th W is, because I think you only said 4, but I'll give you a chance to think about that.
That's very kind of you.
Look, fundraising's always hard. I think it's always hard. It's always been hard for me. And this is the first startup that I've been involved in. And I don't know if it necessarily gets easier, but I would certainly say that you can pattern match a little bit more effectively. And certainly the pandemic changed a lot of the contours of how we got the job done this year. Look, I mean, just this is just some thoughts, again, to the extent that they're useful. I hope they are, but it's more just trying to put some texture around what the experience was like over the last year. Look, my view on fundraising is there are certain companies that seem to be born privileged when it comes to fundraising, right? And they just run into cash, and for them, like, their largest problem is oversubscription. And it's sort of, whether that's the way the company is branded, who the founders are, who their investors are, their idea. There's a whole lot of reasons why these privileged companies can kind of cruise through, and fundraising is never really anything other than just a few emails and a little bit of time. I don't think that's necessarily a reflection on the quality of any businesses. You look at great businesses, Airbnb is an example of this, I know, where, plucking teeth and brutal, like blood sport-like experiences to fundraise. Some of the best companies are like that. We're probably been somewhere in the middle. I think we've been a reasonably well-capitalized company in terms of the Australian marketplace. I think globally, I wouldn't put us in the category of a privileged company. It's certainly been challenging for different reasons along the way. At the end of the day, you never really know who's going to invest. I fundamentally believe that. You can usually work out who's not going to invest pretty quickly, so don't waste your time on those people. But unless someone's like a really strong no, you never really know who is going to write the check, who's going to get on board, who's going to see something in you or your co-founder and your idea and the way that you talk or you think about the world. So my view's always been like, you just got to take meetings and try to continue to open doors. For us in getting to where we got to with MYOB, so Lee, that really began a year ago. We flew to Singapore to meet with some senior folks in KKR right as the pandemic was hitting. It was a pretty creepy plane ride, going over there and back. It's all about just one step in front of the other, right? Take as many meetings as you can, pursue every opportunity that you have. The pandemic probably made the process trickier in some ways because you didn't really get you didn't really get the opportunity to spend time with people. I think as founders, sitting in the room with someone is often a great way for them to get a feel for you and your passion. So you kind of didn't have that card to play. Everyone's looking for a reason. Everyone's always looking for a reason not to do stuff in life, in business and in fundraising. And I think like COVID's just been one big like excuse bag that people can reach into at any time they want. So I actually think it's real credit, honestly, to MYOB, given how much they've got going on this year, over the last few years, new CEO in the last year, big vision in terms of what they're trying to accomplish. That despite the pandemic, we were still able to work with a company that's pretty big and be one of their initial investments out of that fund. So this is more a story than advice. We don't need to go into all the intricacies of how we got it done. Once you do start to feel momentum, you do start to think that actually there's a really good fit here. They share your vision for the world. They are largely supportive of the way that you're trying to solve the problem you're trying to solve. There does then present obvious opportunities to start to pull in some other folks. And I think, we did a pretty good job of that this year. I think, when as that investment was coming together, we did have a lot of other, people that we were able to reach out to and pull that round together. So you kind of got to, it is a little bit like baking a cake. You need to put, certain ingredients in at certain points in time. And so much of pulling these rounds together with multiple investors and different stakeholders is a timing thing and trying to get your lead investor locked in, but not so locked in that the deal isn't still open, and then get other investors moving along for the ride. And anyway, I mean, there's you asked the question, what's it like fundraising in a pandemic? The answer is it's kind of exactly what you think it would be. Like you make something that's, already pretty trickier. And we were lucky to find a partner who was bold enough to not reach into the bag of excuses and say, let's talk again next year. Sometimes I would say like there are very few like proper rounds that get pulled together. Like you can't really fake those rounds. And by that, I mean, you really do need alignment between yourself and your investors, because there will be so many times when they can take the off ramp on the freeway. And this year is a really good example of that. So in many ways, like I do think that if you've got true alignment and they understand what you're trying to get done, and you map to their view of the world and they map to your view of the world, then these things, as difficult as they are, they probably do ultimately get done anyway. You just kind of got to keep pushing. Yeah.
Do you have any tips on how to figure out whether you do have that true alignment, or how to, I guess, test that?
It's not hard. You just have to be true to yourself and your business. Like, you know what your business is. You know why you started the company. Like, there's a pitch deck that's got a whole bunch of other shit and fluff in it that you need to like wrap your business around to make it make sense. But, there's an essence. Every company, like every person, has an essence. And you know what that is. It's why you started doing this thing in the first place. If someone like isn't fully bought into the essence of the company, it's just it will eventually be derailed, and it may not even be derailed before the round gets away. This is the other issue and the bigger problem. You may get an investor who, in 6 months or 12 months after round's closed, it becomes very clear that actually they didn't get the essence. You can get there pretty quickly as well.
I think if you have a look at the track record of the investments that the prospective investor has made, you generally can find some patterns associated with the types of companies that they invest in. And so those patterns could be sector-based patterns. Those patterns could be growth-based patterns. But you can kind of pattern match your company to the mandates of what they have invested in the past. And that gives you a feeling. It doesn't give you the answer. And I think when you get on these calls, you can confirm or kind of or deny that feeling based on the patterns that you've seen these guys do. And the types of questions that they ask, how aggressively they follow up, you can also then have a feel for alignment at the same time. We got some interesting questions through our process. James spoke about kind of the short list of investors, but in order to kind of get to that short list, we really did open it up to kind of 40 or 50 guys that we'd been speaking to over the course of the last 1 to 2 years. And you can narrow down into that short list based on the patterns that people invested in, and you get feelings from. So I think kind of alignment is something that you don't always get right when people make those investments. And unfortunately, that comes into fruition after working with an investor for 12, 24 months. But going into the investment, you can certainly shortlist it down on who is not going to be aligned. And that goes both ways. It goes into what is the entrepreneur's ambition, or what James called essence in creating this company, but also kind of what is the investor's essence, or what are they looking for? Because every single investor has a different mandate. Some are looking for your 10x returns, and some are looking for low risk kind of 2 to 3x's. And it's so critical to kind of be aligned in making sure that what you want to achieve as an entrepreneur is consistent with what that investor wants to do with its capital.
I think on that, like, very practically, you know, I think asking the question of, like, in a single sentence, can you explain why you invested in company A, B, or C, like that track record point, like forcing them to like distill, you know, in their mind what they think the essence of that company is that they're interested in. I think that's really useful. I think also another useful tool there is, like, ask the same question of multiple partners at the fund, because you're actually going to see whether this capital came from the person because that's their view of the world, or whether it came from the person because that's the fund's view of the world. And you probably want the latter, right? You're probably going to get more support for follow-on investments, and you're probably going to be able to actually leverage, you know, the full stack of resources that fund has to offer if, you know, the whole eye sees across what you're trying to do and excited about it.
That's actually, I love that tool. That's excellent. Look, I think we'll probably have some more questions about capital raising for the audience, but from the audience, but I might leave that to the end. So let's jump over to strategy and growth now. I'd like to talk a bit about product market fit and how you first recognized that you might have possibly found product market fit.
You can go.
I mean, this concept of product market fit, and then you got a rocket ship and you just put kind of capital behind that and scale. It sounds really simplistic. I think that's fundamentally wrong. And I think kind of for us, we're constantly searching for product market fit as we evolve and launch more and more products down our funnel. I think the luck part of it, or what we needed, is that initial product market fit. And that was for us at a B2B level. We're a B2B2C business. So the way that we work is we create engagement through the workplace, or distribution through the workplace. And then we're able to kind of sell financial services through that platform. So B2B2C, the financial services being the 2C part, and our workplace software being the B2B part. And they're two different audiences. But the key for us was finding product market fit for the first audience, or what we call our network and infrastructure, at the B2B level. And the answer is we made a bunch of mistakes. We went very, very broad in terms of searching for product market fit, which wasn't necessarily the mistake. It's just the time to realize when we achieve product market fit with what software applications. And so for us, we kind of casted the net broad, launching multiple software applications to find product market fit. But what is that one killer app? What is that one feature that kind of everyone will buy? That probably took us longer than we would have liked in order to define product market fit. And in hindsight, would have liked to have got there a little bit quicker in determining what is the single feature. We went with an approach that kind of launched multiple features consecutively to achieve that, and not really identifying what is, or honing in quickly what was the one unique feature that it hit product market fit. So that would be something that we would do differently.
What was that feature?
For us, it was actually two features, and 1A, 1B, which we call onboarding and benefits. So we kind of went out there and said, HR is broken. How can we fix HR? And the answer is we could have fixed it on so many multiple levels. We could have fixed it on the core HR information system. We could have fixed it on employee engagement when it came to how people distribute and provide benefits to their employees and wellness to their employees. We built a payroll system to fix the way people kind of did payroll, which is still fundamentally broken today. We did a onboarding solution in the way that you welcome new employees into a company and create that first impression in those first 100 days. All of those pieces of the pie or puzzle were broken, and we tried to fix all of them. And the answer is there's huge opportunities for people to fix all four. the problem is that when you try and do a lot of things, it's very, very hard to do all of them really, really well. And so this notion of all in one, or the fruit salad, as we like to call it, isn't necessarily the best product out there. It might yield with the most number of people, but it's not necessarily the best product. And so narrowing it down to the pineapple or the strawberry or whatever it might be within the fruit salad, I think is pretty critical. And for us, it landed, we're at 2 fruits now. I'll continue with the analogy now that we're down the path, but we're at onboarding and benefits of how do you kind of create that first impression, that first experience for new employees remotely in a business during a pandemic, for example. We were great at solving that problem. And then secondly, from a wellness perspective, we spend most of our lives at work. How do you create that right balance between mental, physical, social, and financial wellness as an HR director for employees? And we had a solution to that as well. So finding that initial product market fit, the recommendation or the lesson that we learned is go as narrow and as deep as possible rather than as broad as possible, just because it's really hard to do a lot of things really, really well. Once we found that though, and scaled that, it was only part of the puzzle. It was only the B2B component that we'd solve for. You still had, how do you get people to engage in financial services and change their financial lives at the place where they're earning the majority of their income, and that's at work. And here we were lucky as well. When we created now this distribution infrastructure to access hundreds of thousands of Australians, what we could do now is rapidly test different products down that funnel. What works, what resonates, and taking a really data-centric approach with the amount of data that we had to figure out kind of how were employees engaging with financial services in the workplace. And we continue to do that today. We test products regularly down that distribution funnel and get results back rapidly in terms of what yields and what doesn't. And so I think our ability to find product market fit is constantly evolving and getting better and better with the amount of data that we have. Do you want to add to that?
Yeah, all well said and agree with all that. Look, I, as you said at the beginning of the call, Cheryl, my background is consumer internet. So, the lens I probably have always taken, and maybe just a couple of thoughts on this now, has been through that idea of like how you get product market fit for consumers, and you're just talking about that. The fruit salad point is really important, right? And it's a trap I see a lot of people fall into, which is, addition by addition, when in fact it's addition by subtraction. Like there are very few products that you use today, even the all-in-one products, even these giant sprawling networks that have a whole lot of tentacles coming off them, that began their life like that. It's risky business to get into I think of it as the 100-point check mentality of product, where it's like, I just got to get a passport, a license, and a Medicare card, and then I'm going to be over the 100 points that I need to have a successful product. Probably not. Like, your better bet is going to be to make sure that one of these things stacks up by itself. So that's point number one. And, I'm not going to get deep into fruitology that you sort of spent some time on there. Interesting you chose pineapple as well. So I think that's point number one. Point number two, I think that, we've seen over the last, probably 15 years, this sort of evolution of how people think about product, right? I think it began with product as this sort of dark art that only, product geniuses could approach. And you had these sort of great product visionaries of the 80s and the 90s who really had this idea of this is what I'm going to build. And they spent so much time building it because indeed software was much more difficult to build and took a lot more time. Then I think you saw probably beginning in 2009, 10, when Eric Ries sort of formalized his views on the world in a lean startup, you had this anyone can build product very, very quickly and throw things against a wall and see what sticks and move on with your life. My view is probably unsurprisingly, it lands somewhere in the middle. Philosophically, our view at this business is that vision guides, data refines. You've got to have a product vision. I think the whole idea of I'm going to go and test 20 ideas and one of them might work and that's going to be my business, I just think that's nonsense. I think it's a nonsense approach to product. I think you got to trust your gut, have a view on the world and probably a view on the people who you think will be using this, and then absolutely lean on the data to make decisions. So I think that's, point number 2 is like, trust your vision, trust your gut. Don't just throw things at the wall and see what sticks. At least that's my perspective. Okay. And then I think the final point is you really got to understand who you're building this for, which was one of your 4 Ws. I think that, my last startup Brigade, which didn't work out successfully, failed. Part of the reason that we struggled there was we just didn't have like a very clean snapshot of, who we were building this thing for. We had a lot of stuff and a lot of really good stuff, particularly around, political technology, but drawing a very clear circle around who is going to use this, why they're going to be passionate about it, and why they're going to build it, and kind of starting with that in a concentric circle, and then assuming that kind of early adopter, passionate user, understanding who are the cohorts of people we can move from the inside out. That inside out, start with people who are going to love this thing, to people who will like this thing, and people who don't mind this thing. You really got to be disciplined in how you approach product in that way. Because if you build everything for everyone, you build nothing for anyone. And I think that's a really big, that's the other version of the fruit salad product is now the fruit salad user, right? There's 2 different ways you can fall into a product trap there, which is I'm going to build everything and something will work, or I'm going to build something for everyone and someone will like it. And both of those are fallacies. So that's probably more philosophical than practical, but that's, for us, when we talk about, because we do have a very deep product roadmap, we're very excited about the next couple of years because of what we're going to be able to build. But, for us, all of those principles are very important to us, and that's how we think about running our business.
Yeah, so let's talk a bit more about the first principles thinking, because that is one of the topics we wanted to go a bit deeper in today. And we've heard that both of you operate with that kind of first principles thinking to solve problems. So can you share how you embed this into your business, and how do you solve problems using this?
Look, I just think that so much of startups, right, involves making mistakes. In fact, statistically, you're going to make way more mistakes than you're going to get things right. The problem you have is if you make mistakes without actually going all the way to the bottom of the stack, the 5 whys, that would be a different 5 Ws because they're all why. But if you, without actually going all the way to the bottom and having some bedrock that you're building on, then you're actually not like productively iterating. You're just trying a whole lot of things that exist out in the world. And when you make mistakes, you can't just go back to base camp and be like, cool, we're gonna, we know this thing didn't work to solve this problem. So now we're going to try something else to solve that same problem. So the risk without truly getting to the bottom of your thinking, without taking a step back and fundamentally unpacking why you're working on this thing, why you think this will work, if it works, why is it important? What is that philosophically, why do we think this is the right path versus the wrong path? The reason it's just essential, and it is actually essential, like I don't think you can run a business without doing this, is that when you make mistakes, you're not going to be able to course correct. You're going to come back, turn yourself around in circles, and then start walking in another direction. So first principles thinking for us is actually the foundation upon which you can productively make mistakes. And we know that we're going to make a whole lot of mistakes. So I think there's just a general like operating cadence, operating capacity to a startup that requires you to really go back to first principles pretty much every day. I think the second thing that's essential, and this happens as you start to grow, is when you come up with an idea for a business and you live and you breathe it, you take for granted how many maxims you've actually internalized in the way that you run the business. How many like pieces of dogma that you've actually created, internalized, and operate on every single day in a totally subconscious way. And as you bring in a new person into the company, you need to actually help them understand all of the stuff that's sitting in your head that you don't know you're using on a daily basis, that muscle memory, right? That startup muscle memory. And so being able to actually stop yourself and say, why do we do that? Why? Because we believe this at the time. Okay, why do we believe that at the time? Well, because this was our view. Going all the way back to that actually makes it like far more efficient and I don't want to say efficient and effective, but it's faster and it's easier, and you're going to be able to scale your team more quickly. And it's not about building a whole lot of acolytes, although that's how Dan likes to build teams, a whole lot of mini Dans. It's not true.
All these little boys.
Yeah, exactly right. but you need to be able to help people understand why you did a certain thing, why the business exists in a way, and then they can get up the curve and can operate really, really quickly. Because I think that's actually one of the trickiest things, right? When you get to this sort of 60, 70, 80, 90 person size of business, if you're bringing on a person every other week, like beyond the actual team-based, okay, your designers and your product people and your sales guys are going to, there's sort of particular ideas that they have. All of those things need to be tied back to certain understandings of the business. And if you haven't been able to codify those things, and if you haven't been able to actually consistently build on those things over time, then again, you're not going to have alignment in the business. So I think to me, those are the two big reasons why this is important. The first one is so you can productively iterate and actually use your mistakes to improve. And the second one is so you can scale your intellectual knowledge and your individual views of the world. And as you bring people into the business, they can get up and become contributors really quickly.
Dan, did you have anything to add on that one?
No, I think as we tease out a few more questions, I'll probably add to that further down the track.
Yeah, so I guess in terms of just like your approach to problem solving around this, like, can you maybe share an example of how there was a problem that you guys approached and how you used design thinking or first principles thinking to address it within the team?
Why don't you take them through the five whys and really kind of ask some of our retros maybe on that.
Probably should have prepared for this a little bit better. Let me think for a second. We will actually have an example of this. So here's an example. So, when we started to build out our superannuation offering, the question of like what a super fund should look like, is incredibly subjective, right? And your view of and what are your fees and what are your investment strategies and what's this and what's that? All these sorts of things. You start to get into these incredibly subjective and honestly largely unproductive debates. And so one of the things that we were obsessed about was actually really a first principles observation of our end consumer, which is people really don't want to spend time trying to understand and become experts with their money. And this is actually a big risk when you go to something like Stone and Chalk and you're surrounded by fintech and everyone's like a financial boffin. You can impute that level of passion to your consumer and they simply don't have it. They just don't care, right? They care about Instagram and they care about, buying stuff and they care about their families and their lives and their favorite Netflix shows, but they don't care about, ensuring their superannuation is set up for retirement. And I think bad entrepreneurs blame their end users for that. And they say to them, well, I'm going to build a product for someone like me who cares as much as I do. And then I'm going to be irritated when somehow that doesn't work out. So for us, that was always like, don't blame people that they don't care as much about something as you do. Acknowledge that reality and build a solution around it. And so for us, what we wanted to get at was how do we, when we think about the backbone of the super product, what is the thing that actually people care about and what value do we want to deliver to people? And so for us, it was all about how do we automate this? How do we make this, sorry about the rocking there. How do we make this automated in such that people can, set and believe with confidence that things are on the right track and they feel that things are on the right track. And so what we actually ended up doing was saying, well, the thing that people, really need to feel good about is the idea that as their life changes, this super fund is recalibrating and making decisions in terms of where my capital is being invested without me having to worry about that. And so that made us come up and build up our what is one of the leading life stages products in the market. That was a principle for us that said we're not going to get into the debate about what is our investment philosophy. We're not going to get into the debate about what our fees are going to be, because what we're actually going to say, one of our principles around this is that people need to feel confident in their money, and we need to make it easy for people to feel that confidence. So I think that was a really easy way for us to kind of slice through a lot of, pretty passionate debate from people who care about this space, because they're the sorts of folks that we hire, and say, well, hang on a moment, like, what are we trying to deliver to our users and how can we shape our product around that?
Wow, there's so much there. Dan, did you have anything to add on that one? Otherwise, I might jump over to how you guys have built your network of businesses around you.
Let's focus on that.
Dan's good at that.
All right. So we'd really like to learn a bit more. Like, you've got 2,500 businesses with over 650,000 employees, and you're growing really, really quickly. So we'd like to learn a bit more. How did you grow that network? How do you keep those people together, and how do you keep attracting new ones?
Yeah, so I think one, there's got to be value exchange. We can talk about how we give away a free product, but that product has to have value. And so price was obviously one factor. We wanted to democratize the value that we were providing in a world that was budget constrained, the HR world, the buyer being HR. And so if we could democratize that down to free, price would not be a friction driver behind saying no. So one of the things we wanted to be able to do to grow a network and grow it at scale is reduce price down to zero effectively. And that was one tactic, tool that was incredibly sharp in the way that we were able to scale a network. But price is only as sharp as the value that you're able to provide. And so what we wanted to do on that is hone in, as I said before, on the one or two features that really, really provide value to businesses. And what we found is that that kind of onboarding module of providing a delightful, compliant, and automated employee experience in their first 100 days added huge value to all types of businesses, from enterprise businesses north of 10,000 employees, the likes of Serco and Deloitte that we have as customers, right down to the small SMEs that's never had technology that's been able to automate and engage on that process. And the second big product, obviously, was wellness, and how do we really change the lives of employees financially, socially, physically, and mentally, which there's a growing responsibility or perceived responsibility that workplaces have, particularly as COVID has set in, to do for employees. And so those two products, not only are we pricing those things at zero, but providing real value to employers was critical in building our network. We see our kind of customers not as customers on the B2B side, but really as partners. And I think that framing is critical, both in the way that we make money or get a return as a business, because we do make our money off the downstream financial services that we sell. And so really going in and having that value exchange or that partner exchange with our businesses that we partner with was critical in the overall business model, but really helped on the acquisition side as well. And so those are kind of three kind of ways: price, value, and then partnership. That's really helped us to scale the network. And I think that took us from 0 to 1. Going from 1 to 100, we actually, and I'm not talking, that's not miles per hour, and it's not number of businesses, it's more metaphorically, but going from kind of 1 to 100 or 500 businesses to 2,500 businesses in 12 months, that question of scale needed a different principle beyond partnership, beyond value, beyond price. And that's where distribution came into play. What we found there is that we could contribute price, value, and partnership to businesses in a specific way. But when it came to scale, there were existing players in the marketplace that already had network, that already had distribution. How could we really go in and integrate or lock into those networks and provide value, price, and partnership to a kind of different party, not businesses, but rather downstream, those partners that already had the network? And I think that's where scale came into play. We were able to really demonstrate over the first 500 the value proposition that we could bring to the market. But if we could create that value for a distribution partner, we could scale so much quicker. And so when you look over the last 12 months and the impressive growth that we've had, I would say that the majority, and MYOB to come as a funding partner on top of that, the majority of that growth has been through third-party distribution. We've only been able to achieve, however, that third-party distribution by demonstrating 4 to 5 years of track record of adding value to the end customer. And so on the back of that track record, we've been able to scale distribution. I guess the key learning or message there is you can't go from 0 to 100. You've got to go 0 to 1 and then 1 to 100. And I think we did that really, really well, albeit you'd always like to do it quicker. I think as a business, we've scaled beautifully through a pandemic. And moreover, over the last 12 months, based on the sequencing that we had in terms of direct distribution and then scaling that direct distribution through third-party distribution.
There's just a couple other very specific things. That's all really well said. I would say like tactically, just a couple of ideas. Dan leads the growth of the business and the sales organization reports into him. But as sort of an outside observer, the other things I've seen the guys do incredibly well. The first thing is, I think when you find a customer you have customers who like your product and customers who love your product. When you find customers who love your product, like the ability of our organization to very quickly just like massively dive into that vertical with confidence, with gusto, was transformative, right? And I think you starting broad, you're servicing a lot of people like, well, hang on a moment, we've got this little cluster over here of people who seem to love it. Let's test that a bit more, and then bam, go, right? And that can be everything from how you structure your sales teams to how you comp your teams to how you market in channels to what conferences you attend, all that sort of stuff. So I think there's real power in finding, those who love it and then double, triple, quadrupling down on that. And then also being clear as you're starting to, approach, the contours of the addressable market, sticking your head up and saying, okay, like what's going to happen in 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, and let's get prepped up for that. So I think that's point number one, because I think I see too many people who get worried. I don't have the confidence to like go deep into this particular vertical because I'm going to alienate the rest of my customers. The reality is like alienation is good, right? In the sense that you need to provide something for someone that is compelling, and it will naturally come at the expense probably of other folks. And businesses and customers have short memories. You can always turn around and market them later on with a message that is not alienating. And then the second thing, and Brittany, who leads marketing for us, is not on the call at the moment. I think we've been very good as well at like recalibrating our message and the channels that we push that message through, not just based on our own, like what we're hearing, but also the zeitgeist, what's happening in the world, what channels are working with there. So again, as long as it stays true to your vision and it's largely aligned with what you're trying to do, don't be scared to one quarter push this message in a really specific way to a really specific segment, because that then can allow you to really, rip through that. So I think specific markets, specific segments, in addition to the 3 points Dan made.
With those specific markets and specific segments, like, are there any particular acquisition channels that worked better than others?
Look, we've gone down the path. When we talk about acquisition channels, I think kind of traditionally we think, how do we market? What are the tools that we use, whether that be paid, whether that be social, whether that be above the line, outbound, we've kind of gone through all of those tools and continue to use those tools today. I think the problem with paid is that over time that arbitrage closes. And so when you come to your CAC and you think you're doing brilliantly for the first 12 months because your CAC ratios look fantastic, inevitably CAC goes up over time, and that kind of arbitrage on paid tends to close and become efficient over time. And so this business, in terms of its distribution at the B2B level, we never wanted to be reliant or even dominant within our paid kind of spend when it came to customer acquisition. We wanted to go more consistent and more permanent methods of acquiring businesses than just paid. And I think kind of distribution, third-party distribution has been really, really strong on that front, and kind of going through partners and providing kind of value to those partners, I think has been particularly good. But as James said, honing in on the sector, the love versus the people who like the product, and then mapping that from a outbound case study perspective, I think has been particularly strong. And so an example of this in our business is the 3 or 4 sectors as a starting point that we went deep into were retail, hospitality, recruitment, and healthcare. And so we found similar characteristics with leading businesses in each of those spaces, whether it be Solitel or H&M or in the healthcare space, guys like Fullerton Health, Helios, these kind of businesses that really have led the way. When we were able to get those guys as customers, how can we really go in and bleed out those case studies into the market rather than just relying on paid spend? So I think we've been particularly good at identifying verticals and then just adding verticals from there, but going deeper into concentrated verticals quarter on quarter. What we also found is within those verticals, you had certain players in those ecosystems. And so by getting kind of a leading business in each sector and then customers within each vertical, we could then tap into the ecosystem of players, be it payroll systems who service those industries or advisors who service those industries. We could focus in on distribution after we'd kind of identified leading kind of customers and then some scale within the vertical.
Awesome. That's probably one of the deepest answers I've ever gotten when I've asked the what acquisition channels do you like? So I love it. Let's touch a little bit on, everyone talks about failures and successes, but I'd maybe reframe it as, biggest learning moment from each of you.
Pick your right co-founder. I was quick on that.
Got in.
Look, we have a value at Flair called BAT 400, and we can talk about values if we get some time later on. But I really love this value, and the value is a baseball terminology, and I'll probably botch the value, but I'll give it a go, which basically says the best batter in the major leagues is he or her steps up. Major leagues, probably him, but steps up to the plate, and the best average in the history of the majors is 400, which means out of 1,000 at bats, only 400 times does that guy get on base. And so what it also means is 600 times he or she doesn't. Now, this is a concept of embracing kind of failure, the notion of step up, have a swing, 600 times out of 1,000, you're probably going to fail, and that's awesome, right? And so kind of failures, and you didn't ask this question, but I'll probably just broaden out my answer. 600 times out of 1,000, failure is awesome. That's a really, really weird construct, but one that startups have to get comfortable with really, really quickly. And as leaders of businesses or founders of businesses, you have to kind of provide the infrastructure for your team to fail. And I think we do that particularly well at Flair. And so my biggest learning or my biggest failure over time has been kind of, or one thing that we want to get right is the team and the people that you go to work with each day. And as a founder, the closest person on that front is your co-founder. And the relationship that you have with your co-founder is so critical to the overall success, but moreover, your happiness within building this thing that is so personal to you. And so I think kind of my biggest lesson over the last 15 years is identifying what is the right type of co-founder for me. And that's different for everyone. I'm lucky enough to sit in the corner and have someone next to me in James, but that took 15 years of iteration. And so I think kind of my learning or my biggest lesson and my biggest failures historically have picked the right co-founder at the right point in time for you.
My turn. Well, like I've spoken a little bit about some of the challenges we had at Brigade, particularly. I think there it was, it was really about we imputed our view of the world to our customers in terms of how much they cared, and I think that was just a mistake that we learned, and we in many ways the very strong emphasis we've placed on distribution in this business was in some part, I think, a reaction to the lack of emphasis we placed on it in my last business, and we really wanted to make sure we majored there when we did it before. I think just a general learning, right? Because I think I'm coming up to probably 12 or 13 years doing this now. Just enjoy the ride, like we've recently at Flair, I don't really know why we decided to do this, but it's been great. We sort of changed what used to be a kickoff meeting every Monday, where we kind of dive into updates on the business and metrics and stuff like that. And we just kind of turned it into this sort of Monday morning fireside chat where we just talk about stuff that we're doing, whether it's how to fundraise or whatever else. And this last week, we had our head of product and our chief technology and product officer, Dave Morrison and Liz Crawford, both of whom were really early and went on the ride that they went on at Birchbox. So Liz was founding CTO at Birchbox, and Dave was one of the early product folks there. And obviously, for those who don't recall, Birchbox was really I think one of the great early e-commerce startups. There was a whole period of time where you were Birchbox for X, and it was really the subscription model, monthly subscription model e-commerce that I think was pretty transformative. And in many ways, I said this on Monday as well, really put New York on the map when it came to the tech scene. And just asking those guys as we kind of unpack their journey and how they went from, nothing to raising, I think 60 odd million in their Series B. They got up to $1 billion valuation, and then things didn't work out in the end. And, that business will be ultimately written up as a business that didn't work, it failed. But just like how good that experience was, and here's an example of a business that went all the way up and came all the way back down. But we asked them on Monday, like, what's their, how do they reflect on that, and how do they feel about that? And the answer is, I feel amazing. It was one of the, their words, one of the best experiences they had in their life. And same for me when I look back at our startups, the good ones or the bad ones. Like, ultimately, in terms of like how much fun you have on a daily basis and how enjoyable this is, and what sort of lifestyle we've chosen to lead, all of those things in many ways, not to say that it's not, a punch in the face when you've got to handle all these really tough times, but it's your choice, I think, about whether or not, your experience in the startup is a good or a bad one. And in many ways, it doesn't actually have any relationship to whether or not your startup is a good or a bad startup, right? It's just like how you live your life and how you experience these interactions throughout that journey. So I would just say, like, the only thing the big learning for me is just make sure that, you're having fun. Make sure that and for us, I think that's a lot of the people, the people we spend time with. And when people ask, like, why do I do startups specifically, like in order, or why do I work on the particular startups I work on? Like, in order, 100%, the order goes for me. Number one, am I working with someone or people who I want to be working with and spending time with? Number two, am I tackling a problem that I think is important and worthwhile? And then number three is, do I think that my business actually has a chance to be successful and solve the problem I'm trying to solve? So in many ways, it's people, problem, business. Whereas I think a lot of people, it's business, maybe it's business, problem, people, the other way around at all. I always say, like, when you work in startups, one of the great gifts that you have is you get to choose who you work with. And more importantly, you don't have to put up with assholes. You don't have to, like, wake up each day and go into some job at a big company where, Tony from accounting is like a real creep, and you got to spend time with Tony from accounting. I don't know Tony from accounting, but like every day you got to deal with this. And I just think, like, make sure you're enjoying it, because, like, statistically, business probably won't work out. That's about 400 mentality. And if you decided the only way you can have a terrific time is if your business works out, then you're probably not going to have a terrific time.
Tony from accounting could be on the call.
He could be. And if he is, sorry, Tony, I know sometimes you just misunderstood.
He's a rock-like guy. Yeah.
Poor Tony. Okay, so we have had heaps of questions come through. So thank you, everyone. We've only got like 4 minutes left. So I'm going to try to run through a bunch of these. And James and Dan, if you could maybe give as short as answers as possible. So how did you connect with former Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull?
Through MYOB KKR.
And what's he like?
Legend.
Excellent.
He'd be the future Prime Minister.
Yeah, it's not over.
And why did you?
I don't know if it's not over. I don't know anything here. I don't know anything.
Why did you partner with MYOB over Xero or QuickBooks?
Oh, you can start, mate. Short answer.
I'll give you a 15-second answer. I think that QuickBooks and Xero would have been great partners as well. I think it goes back to alignment, and really for MYOB, it was taking a distribution base, maybe as not used to be the incumbent, now kind of reimagining themselves as the disruptor, and how do they kind of create a third wave beyond SaaS to really go in and transform their business model, and financial services should be that for us and should be that for them. So alignment is the answer. Essence.
Yeah. What is your top 2 goals right now?
Scale and culture. I'd say those are the 2 goals for us. And you can call that one is, how do you scale with a great culture?
One piece of advice that you took but wish you didn't take?
I don't know. What advice have I taken that was bad advice? I don't know. I'm generally a positive person. I kind of feel it's like that Garth Brooks song. No, it's not Garth Brooks, Tim McGrath song.
Pass.
Yeah.
Okay. What else do you have here? What was the hardest part of fundraising throughout your entire fundraising journey?
Certainty. So the challenge is that as you build your business, particularly during a pandemic, which creates more uncertainty, you're burning cash. And so you're trying to scale at the same time in order to raise more capital and scale the business. And so you're spending more and more money. And so the biggest challenge in a capital raising process is the uncertainty associated with how much you're going to raise and who the investor is going to be and whether it's going to land on time. And so with that uncertainty, running the business and scaling at the same rate or a rate that you can try and control is incredibly challenging.
So you need co-founders, huh? So you need better than one.
Well, there's a co-founder question. Can you share details what went wrong with a co-founder in the past?
Alignment. Nothing specific on, I think that's better left unsaid, but in terms of the general philosophy is total alignment. Do you have the alignment in terms of what you're trying to achieve? And neither is right or wrong. You just got different views potentially. So it can be, what is the vision? What are your values? Different people have different values. So vision, values, and then overall kind of, can you have a beer with that person on the weekend? And if the answer to those any of those three questions is misaligned, you're going to have a problem.
VB, who said VB? That would have been a third.
The type of
would have been a third V.
Yeah.
How do you decide whether you build your own tech or buy something off the shelf and customize it or lease it?
I don't think that there's, again, a right or wrong answer. It depends on which part of the value chain. I think it comes down to core versus non-core. So in the case of core, I think you want to build out the thing yourself. In the case of non-core, I think you generally want to buy or partner. That's a very, very high level perspective. There also is timing issues, right? It could be core, but the time you don't have the capital or aren't mature enough or don't know whether it's going to work. And so in those cases, timing, I think, is a critical component as to when you buy versus when you partner. You might start off based on timing partnering to test something and then build. And so I think those two elements come into play is core versus non-core, and then the timing of when you build versus when you partner.
What keeps you up at night?
Business. I think kind of these things are for me anyway, is 24/7 kind of, you're always on. I think that's a bad thing, to be honest with you, but you asked the direct question, what keeps you up at night? And the reality is problems. And for the full journey, there will be problems. And my inability to switch off keeps me up at night.
And Dan keeps
Awesome.
with his problem.
Yeah, thanks.
Well, it sounds like a fantastic co-founder relationship right there.
Good.
We're lucky.
Okay, so we are at the end. We're finishing right on time. A big thank you to everyone. Most importantly, thank you to James and Dan for spending this time with us and for answering all of our awesome questions. Thank you for those of you who have sent them in. And please make sure that you fill out the survey at the end of this. And if you would like to know any more about Flare or Stone and Chalk, please reach out.
Thanks, Cheryl. Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Thanks, everyone.